Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Stephanie Cox in for Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, the U.S. Navy has seized an Iranian vessel and is now investigating its cargo after it tried to breach a U.S. blockade to return to Iran. Worth noting, the ship is also heavily tied to China. The U.S. and the Philippines are kicking off massive military drills, sending a message to China, and Japan is joining in fully for the first time.
Regardless of the challenges elsewhere in the world, the United States' focus on the Indo-Pacific.
Not only at sea, but also in cyberspace, China remains the biggest threat. That's the latest warning from FBI Director Kash Patel.
The most persistent and active cyber threat we face in the world is from China.
A luxury car brand known for its Scandinavian values is facing backlash over a controversial partnership in China. Why Volvo is teaming up with a warrior political commentator and what it could mean for its global image. An Iranian cargo ship that visited China last month is now in U.S. custody. U.S. forces seized the vessel on Sunday after it attempted to break the blockade and enter an Iranian port. Officials now examining what's on board as concerns grow over whether China is secretly supporting Iran militarily. NTD's Flora Hua has more on that.
A U.S. blockade is still in effect for all ships entering and leaving Iranian ports, and this Iranian cargo ship, the Tosca, tried to test it, refusing to stop when the U.S. Navy ordered it to.
Auto vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room.
President Trump posted on Sunday that a U.S. Navy destroyer intercepted the ship in the Gulf of Oman, and it is now in U.S. custody. U.S. forces boarded the disabled vessel, and an investigation is now underway. Former U.S. Navy officer Charlie Brown told the Wall Street Journal that he believes the vessel was likely carrying items valuable to Iran. He said that may help explain why the ship tried to break the U.S. blockade. And here's a kicker. The vessel Tosca belongs to a fleet that visits China often. According to maritime data, it made stops at two major Chinese port cities at the end of March, Shanghai and Zhuhai. In Zhuhai, Gaolan Port is a major hub for heavy industry and liquid chemical storage that includes precursors used to make medium-range missiles. Maritime data also shows the ship spent much of last year sailing back and forth between China and Iran. The Tosca was sanctioned in 2018 for illicit activity, including suspected smuggling. China responded on Monday, saying it is concerned over the U.S. seizure. President Trump said last week that Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping promised him China is not sending weapons to Iran. He also previously warned of steep tariffs on China if it's caught aiding Iran militarily. But experts warn that China has a history of exploiting dual-use technologies and goods to avoid sanctions. The incident is further straining tensions between the U.S. and Iran, and potentially with China as well. Iran said on Monday it has no plans to attend another round of peace talks, though it hasn't completely ruled it out. Flora Hua, NTD News.
It remains uncertain whether the U.S.-Iran peace talks will take place on Tuesday. President Trump told Bloomberg on Monday that he's unlikely to extend the ceasefire, adding it's set to expire Wednesday evening, Washington time. NTD's Carrie Dunst was joined by Rick Fisher, Senior Fellow at the International Assessment and Strategy Center, to discuss the Iran war.
Rick, in terms of that blockade having its first encounter with an Iranian ship, I'd love to get your observations and analysis of that.
Yes. The American ability to impose this blockade is now unquestioned. The taking out of the Iranian ship that after 6 hours refused to abide by the embargo yesterday was proof of that. The ship was damaged, but not sunk. None of the crew died in the process. Marines boarded the ship. All classic, dangerous, but simply well within the capabilities of the American Navy, Coast Guard units, and Marines that are deployed now in the Gulf of Hormuz region. Are there dangers? Yes, indeed. Iran still has some number of small, concealable, fast attack craft that are armed with anti-ship missiles, most likely designed in China, co-produced in Iran. And Iran also has access to a large number of naval mines that it could deploy. But the forces that the Americans have now in the Gulf of Hormuz, from radar aircraft, radar on ships, all of the overhead satellite surveillance, it would be very easy for the United States to find any mobile Iranian platform and increasingly attack it.
If Iran does not come to the table, what are the president's best options to try to really maintain the civilian infrastructure, but completely and as effectively have a dent in the IRGC to try to move to a next phase?
Well, the president has stated quite clearly that come Wednesday, he has the option of attacking Iranian infrastructure in a very broad way. Power plants and bridges, he said. Going after the bridges is a very interesting prospect. Take out the bridges, isolate the IRGC power centers. You diminish the ability of one power center to deploy to assist another power center. And that opens the option of trying to foment local rebellions. If you can help a large city to overthrow the IRCG and prevent that city from being attacked from other major IRGC units, then you have the ability or the option to build up an oppositional power center. And once that happens, you can then apply active political warfare strategies to try to spread that rebellion. And once you have a power center, once you have airstrips that you can exploit to bring in supplies and weapons and helicopters to begin supplying other cities that rebel and are taken over from the IRGC, then you begin to create a momentum. And then you really put the pressure on whatever leadership remains in Tehran, either by encouraging the mass population to rise up and overthrow the center of that regime. And once that happens, then it's a brand new day.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright addressing U.S. action taken to extend a pause on sanctions of Russian oil. He says Russian oil was flowing to China despite the sanctions, but pausing them allows other countries to receive Russian oil too. That's in order to keep global oil flowing amid the Iran conflict.
G20 conference was here. We had bankers from around the world basically making pleas. Hey, we want to keep energy prices down for us. Just help with us. Just help us. Be constructive. All that Russian oil, it goes to China anyway. All we're doing is temporarily allowing it to flow instead of all to China to flow into other Asian refineries. It's to lower the price of energy in Asia and in Europe.
Wright also commented on the significance of the rise in global oil prices. He said it's necessary sacrifice at this moment, but that the prices are still lower than during the Biden administration. He also mentioned that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz before, and that's one of the reasons why a regime change in Iran is necessary. He says this time the U.S. has enough leverage and power to deal with any potential future Hormuz blockades.
Prices have likely peaked, and they'll start going down. Certainly with a resolution of this conflict, you'll see prices go down. Prices across the board on energy prices will go down.
But it might not be under $3 a gallon until 2027.
The U.S. and Japan flexing muscles at China. Japan is participating fully in a joint drill with the U.S. and the Philippines for the first time. And China has sent warships to conduct drills in the Western Pacific. Over in Taiwan, the island nation said Monday it has detected a Chinese aircraft carrier sailing through the Taiwan Strait, that sensitive waterway separating the island from mainland China. Beijing's move comes as tens of thousands of U.S. and Philippine troops kick off large-scale combat drills. The exercises are among the largest of their kind. They're seen as a response to growing Chinese aggression in the region. The drill comes amid growing concern in Japan and South Korea that the Iran war could pull U.S. attention away from Asia. Here's the commanding general of the U.S. Marine Expeditionary Force at the opening ceremony of the drills.
Regardless of the challenges elsewhere in the world, the United States' focus on the Indo-Pacific and our ironclad commitment to the Philippines remains unwavering.
It's worth noting this year marks the first time Japan is fully participating in the joint drills. Japan's self-defense forces are sending 1,400 troops, about 10 times as many as last year. The joint drill will be conducted in the areas facing the Taiwan Strait and near the disputed South China Sea. In the South China Sea, Chinese Coast Guard ships have previously rammed Filipino vessels as tensions continue to rise in the region. Concerns are also mounting over a possible conflict involving Taiwan. The Philippine president said last year that the country would be drawn into any war over Taiwan given its proximity to the island. FBI Director Kash Patel is warning that China remains the most active cyber threat facing the U.S. Patel speaking to Fox News, highlighting how the FBI has stepped up cyber enforcement.
Look at our intelligence community's assessment that came out last year, at the end of last year, which specifically stated that the most persistent and active cyber threat we face in the world is from China. This FBI last year arrested over 200 cyber actors, and this year we're already up to 60. And we launched Operation Winter Shield, which was our 60-day campaign with direct engagement with the private sector. And so our ask to the private sector after our 600-plus engagements in 60 days is let us in early, call us often. We will show up with our cyber action team, our CAT team, expel these bad actors, and dismantle the networks.
Patel also pointing to broader gains across the Bureau, citing tens of thousands of arrests for violent crime and the disruption of thousands of gangs. The FBI director also highlighting the more than 6,000 child victims that have been located. And he says the agency has seized enough fentanyl to kill 180 million Americans. Coming up, a luxury car brand known for its Scandinavian values is facing backlash over a controversial partnership in China. Why Volvo is teaming up with a wolf warrior political commentator and what it could mean for its global image. And the European Union is moving to tighten 5G security rules. China responded, saying it could retaliate if its tech firms are forced out of European networks. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Stephanie Cox in for Tiffany Meyer. A new marketing move by Swedish automaker Volvo is drawing scrutiny both inside and outside China. The company has partnered with one of China's loudest government voices, Hu Xinjian, a figure known for his nationalist views. The move is triggering debate over whether global brands are reshaping their identity to win over the Chinese market. In 2010, Chinese automaker Geely acquired Volvo cars from Ford Motor Company for roughly $1.8 billion. Since then, Volvo has transformed into what analysts describe as a China-led global brand. Volvo has long been associated with safety, neutrality, and Swedish values. But the company recently introduced Hu Xinjian as a brand friend in China as part of its 99th anniversary campaign. Hu is the former editor-in-chief of the Global Times, a state-backed mouthpiece. Hu is known as a prominent wolf warrior voice, a staunch defender of Beijing's policies. He previously suggested China's military could shoot down U.S. aircraft escorting Nancy Pelosi's plane to Taiwan. And he also repeatedly said force remains an option regarding the island. On top of that, Hu Xinjian called for reciprocal countermeasures against the U.S. Swedish journalist Joe J. Olsen has questioned whether Volvo can still be considered a Swedish company. Since China's Geely bought Volvo from Ford in 2010, the brand has aggressively localized to expand in China. The company now sees China as one of its largest and most important markets. Volvo also relies heavily on Chinese factories, supply chains, and EV technology. Supporters of Volvo's strategy say the company recognizes that in China, political alignment can be just as important as product safety. They argue these kinds of marketing moves are aimed at appealing to politically aligned elites. However, not everyone agrees. Some frontline sales staff say the campaign has generated attention and online traffic, but may also be affecting the brand's premium image. In some cases, potential buyers have reportedly chosen other brands due to political concerns. As global companies continue to navigate China's large but complex market, Volvo's case raises a broader question. How far are global brands willing to go in tailoring their image for different regions? And how much inconsistency are consumers willing to accept? Tensions between Europe and China are heating up again, this time over cybersecurity. The EU is moving closer to forcing out certain Chinese tech companies from its networks. And in response on Friday, Beijing warned it will hit back if that happens. The draft law would require countries in the European Union to remove companies considered security risks from their 5G networks within 3 years. That would mean countries would have to phase out so-called high-risk telecom suppliers from core parts of their networks. It's part of the EU's broader efforts to tighten control and security over its critical infrastructure. The U.S. has already banned imports of new Huawei and ZTE telecom equipment since 2022. Both are Chinese companies. Since then, Washington has urged allies in Europe to do the same, citing national security risks. Beijing pushed back on the EU's plan, calling it politically driven and warning it could hurt economic ties. Chinese officials say countermeasures could include probes into European firms and even legal action, claiming the plan violates WTO trade rules. They're also urging changes to the proposal, pointing to a section that labels certain countries as cybersecurity risks. The warning is the latest sign of rising tension between China and the EU, with businesses caught in the middle. The clock is ticking down to what could be the next round of negotiations in Pakistan as the U.S.-Iran ceasefire nears its deadline amid rising tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. To discuss it, we spoke with Captain Brent Sadler, Research Fellow for Naval Warfare at the Heritage Foundation, and a former U.S. Navy officer. President Trump saying Iran violated the ceasefire agreement by firing shots Saturday aimed at that French ship and freighter from the United Kingdom. From a naval warfare standpoint, how serious is that incident?
Well, I'd also add there's an Indian vessel that was also involved over the weekend in an altercation with the IRGC, resulting in the government in New Delhi summoning the Iranian ambassador there to explain over the weekend as well. So the flare-up of tensions, I think, should be expected as the Iranian government is fractured. You've got the hardliners, the military on one side, that's the IRGC, not the professional military. And then you've got what appears to be a growing, other secondary group that's more moderating in its approach, not in its worldview for sure, and that's led by their political leadership. And that's the group that went to Pakistan for the first round of negotiations. It's an open question. The odds are very low that even if the meeting were to occur, there'd be very little confidence that Iran would be able to honor at this stage any obligations or any commitments it would make.
And just looking at that strait, do these incidents indicate that Iran's still capable of disrupting the flow of oil, or can the U.S. shut it down if it wants to?
What it shows is that the underwriters, the insurance, and the shippers themselves are still lacking in the confidence that they can transit the strait safely. The Iranians have not been able to sink a ship. They've had about 30 attacks since the beginning of this. Really only one was substantial damage or to a loss of a vessel. Most of the attacks have been cosmetic or very small, minor, and the ships have headed off to secure anchorage to assess and then continue on their way. There have been casualties. About 4 sailors have lost their lives since the beginning, and these are not U.S. or Israeli or Iranian sailors. These are sailors from various countries uninvolved directly in the conflict. So it really comes down to an equation about how to instill confidence. When the U.S. sent its destroyers and mine clearance vessels back while the negotiations were breaking down a little over a week ago, the confidence went up. Ships started sailing. They were getting underway. And then the Iranians launched this attack, and it seems to kind of put a pause on that. So perhaps another demonstration of resolve and the ability to clear the straits is necessary.
And how much do you think that would degrade Iran's ability to keep fighting?
Well, I think now if this actually occurs and the target list does go to the IRGC and its ability to control the street, that's the opportunity and perhaps the last window of time for the Iranian people to rise up or for a faction to break off and seek a new path or to create a new regime in Iran, one in which is one that the United States and its neighbors can actually live with in peace.
And finally, Brent, Pakistan is heavily indebted to Beijing. That's where the talks are scheduled to be held. And you mentioned that last time we spoke about that relationship with China. As China has every strategic interest in keeping the Strait of Hormuz wide open for its own oil lifeline, how does that Chinese-Pakistani axis potentially change the balance in these negotiations?
Yeah, unlike sustaining or keeping the war in Ukraine going, which just bleeds the United States and the West, China definitely has a different set of interest here in trying to see a quick resolution because it does rely on the access of cheap oil, petroleum from the Persian Gulf, not just Iran. And right now that's being interdicted, it's being slowed, and it's creating a significant problem for their own economy back home in mainland China. So again, behind these negotiations, I think there is a dark hand coming from Beijing to try to push or cajole the leadership in Tehran to put an end to this conflict and reopen the straits.
All right, Captain Brent Sadler, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Stephanie Cox, in for Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.